What a week in the world of New York sports. There's so much to discuss as we end the second week of October. So we're going to do what we do each week here on the New York Sports Rapid Rundown. That is talk about the hottest three topics in New York sports. And joining me today as we close out Hispanic Heritage Month is the Spanish radio voice of the New York Yankees on WFAN's sister station, WADO, the one and only Rickie Ricardo. Rickie, what's going on?
Dexter, it's all good. A great weekend. A tremendous Sunday night and an even bigger Monday night for New York sports fans.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just what's coming next. This week and everything that's happened before has been so eventful, right? And eventful.
And we're 4 wins away on each side from something even bigger. If you want to touch on that.
I know, and we were talking about this before we just came on together. There's a whole generation of folks who've never seen a Subway Series, and we're going to get into that and why that's a possibility. So an eventful sports week here in the Big Apple. We have the Giants looking to make it back-to-back wins in Week 6. The New York baseball teams, as Rickie just mentioned, both reaching the Final Four of the MLB playoffs. But first, we have to talk about the New York Jets. Rickie, you know this. The Jets, they fired their coach on Monday, just one day after the Week 5 loss to the Vikings in London. Robert Saleh, he's out. Jeff Ulbrich is in as interim head coach. Was this the right move for the 2-3 Jets, and does an in-season change of head coach change the issues that are with this team right now?
Well, there's blame to go around, lots of blame to go around. But obviously the guy that's on the chopping block is always the head coach and not going to fire the players. But I'll tell you this, and look, and to make it clear, I'm a Philadelphia Eagles broadcaster, but I am a Jet fan for life, right? I've been in Miami for the interceptions in the AFC Championship game. I was in Cleveland when they threw the flag on Mark Gastineau, and the Browns came back and beat us in overtime. So I've had plenty of Jet pain. So I can sit here and honestly tell you that the cloud that was over the Jets during the Robert Saleh era, I think has been lifted. Now, was everything Saleh's fault? No, absolutely not. But there was just bad body language from the head coach. I didn't like some of his play calling decisions, or at least use of clock management. I didn't like just the overall aura that he brought to this team. There was some negativity inside that locker room, the way Breece Hall has been used or not used, if you want to look at it that way recently. I think a change was necessary. You know, is Jeff Ulbrich, who's the defensive coordinator, going to change the lack of offense or the play calling on the offensive side? They've changed the play caller. We'll see if that works. But look, they've got a future Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers that obviously needs to play up to his reputation and his legacy. There's a lot of blame to go around, but something had to change. This could not continue the way it was for these first 5 weeks. Losing at home against Denver, unacceptable. Going to London and losing against an ex-Jet quarterback, albeit he's been maybe the MVP of the league, or at least in the conversation, and Sam Darnold and the Vikings. Again, unacceptable. But there was just bad, negative energy around this team. Any change, I think, is a positive for these Jets.
Man, any change is a positive for the Jets. That's how bad things got for Rickie. Sorry for your pain, Rickie. I'm so sorry. I know you've dealt with a lot of pain. I'm very sorry about that. So Jeff Ulbrich, then later in the week, and you kind of hit on this, he later announced that Nathaniel Hackett had been stripped of his play-calling duties, and that responsibility is going to go to Todd Downing, right? Offense seems right now, at least, to be the Jets' biggest problem. So how much of this is now on Downing and Rodgers to remedy a broken offense?
Well, it remains to be seen if moving away from, quote-unquote, his guy, all right, is going to be a positive change for Aaron Rodgers. If I'm Downing, I'm basically letting Rodgers run this offense and either sink or swim. As far as the defense is concerned, everybody says the biggest Jet problem has been the offense. But at times during these first 5 weeks, when the offense has shown flashes, the defense has let them down. It's not like the defense has been the steel curtain or the no-name defense of the Dolphins or the Ravens defense or the 85 Bears. They've been good, but they have bent at times and at the wrong time. Now, if you measure one against the other, the defense has outperformed the offense, but I think there's blame to go around on the defensive side too. Now, I think it all comes down to Rodgers. You could have Dexter Henry or Rickie Ricardo calling the plays. With the kind of talent that they've got on offense, albeit they've got a young left tackle playing out of position at right tackle, which I think has been very clear here since he stepped in. But if Rodgers starts to play to the level that we expect him to play, and it's 5 weeks into a season where he didn't play at all last year other than those first 4 plays in week 1 against Buffalo. So there might still be some rust there. It's about time that rust starts to fall off, and what better place for it to start falling off than Monday night against the same team in the same situation on a Monday night against the Buffalo Bills. It'll be a bad memory of the last time they played Buffalo on a Monday night, obviously the night that Rodgers got hurt. It's time to clean things up, move beyond all the negativity, and it starts this Monday.
It does start this Monday. See if the Jets, as Rickie said, can remove that cloud that has been over them, a dark cloud that has been over the Jets. We'll see if they're able to do that on Monday night. Change of coach. Now it's time to see if they can change the season.
I'm going to look at this almost the way that the Raiders reacted to Antonio Pierce in-season coaching change last year. There was a burst of energy. Look, it may not last the whole year, but at least for these first few weeks, usually when you have an in-season change at coach or in baseball a manager, sometimes you see it, not so much in the NBA or the NHL, but at least in baseball and football, sometimes the in-season change, at least in the beginning, brings a different positive energy. Whether it lasts for the last 12, 13 weeks that remains in the regular season, that remains to be seen.
We will see if it sparks a change. Okay, let's switch gears, Rickie. Let's talk about baseball, because this week, Yankees, they advanced to the League Championship Series. The team is awaiting the winner of the Guardians and the Tigers Division Series to see who they will play in the next round. What did you make of the Yanks' performance knocking off the Royals in the Division Series, and who do you think is the best matchup for them in the ALCS? Are you going with the Guardians or are you going with the Tigers?
Well, number one, I think the Yankees are starting to look like the April and May Yankees that we saw in this regular season. Remember, from June on, they were basically a 500 team and cruised their way into their postseason spot. I got to be honest with you, Dexter. The American League Central has been a playground for the Yankees, whether it be Minnesota over the years. They've been the worst culprit, obviously. Cleveland has battled the Yankees. They beat them back in '97, but since then they haven't been able to get over that hump. The Tigers, they have a positive record, does Detroit. When you look at the teams that have a winning record against the Yankees all time in postseason play, the Detroit Tigers are one of the 6 teams that has a positive record against the New York Yankees. This particular Tiger team is kind of doing it with smoke and mirrors. It's Tariq Skubal and, a lot of relief pitchers. A.J. Hinch doing a masterful job of running that bullpen. But against Kansas City, who was obviously an inferior team against the Yankees, they took care of business in 4 games, didn't need to come back home, have the weekend off to watch the Jets and the Giants. Neither one of those 2 teams that are battling, Cleveland and Detroit, I think are capable of beating the Yankees 4 times in a 9-day period. A 7-game series overall at length is 9 days. I don't think either one of those 2 teams can beat the Yankees 4 times in 7 games. Who would I prefer to see? I think it's a much sexier matchup against the Detroit Tigers. It's a lot of names that nobody has ever heard of on both teams. There's no real ace in the Cleveland Guardian pitching staff. You do have a very good, probably the Cy Young Award winner, the Triple Crown pitcher of the American League, and Tariq Skubal pitching for the Tigers, but he won't be able to go until Game 3 in that series, and then if it gets stretched out, he might be ready for a Game 6 or a Game 7 back at Yankee Stadium. So I think a little bit sexier matchup would be the Detroit Tigers. On the National League side, that's a whole nother conversation.
And we're going to get to that. One thing I want to ask you about that, because you said you think the Yankees should take care of business against either of those teams. Does that put more pressure on the Yankees here in this ALCS when they haven't been to the World Series in a while to get it done against either of these 2 teams?
Well, you can look at it one of 2 ways. Either the heavy lifting was already done by the teams that eliminated the Astros and the Orioles. That may have taken some of the pressure off the Yankees, but at the same time now, they're probably going to be such heavy favorites that maybe it kind of twists around and brings the pressure back, but in a different way. I think it was, if they would have played either Houston or Baltimore, obviously the Astros have been their nemesis in postseason for the last, however, 7, 8 years, whatever it might be. The Orioles beat them in the division last year. They were the runner-ups in the division this year. So you had that kind of battle for supremacy in the division in a postseason series, different kind of pressure. Now it's pressure. It's almost as if they get to a Subway Series, the Yankees are going to be favored as they were back in 2000. So you've got that kind of a different feel to pressure to it. They're going to be heavy favorites against either one of these teams, Detroit or Cleveland. So pressure, yes, different than if it was Houston or Baltimore. But when you're the New York Yankees and mission is World Series or failure, there's always pressure.
That is fair. There always is that pressure when you wear the pinstripes, for sure. Okay, you talked about the National League. The Mets, they also advanced to the League Championship Series as they continue the 0-5 to OMG vibes. They knocked off the Phillies in 4 games. The Metropolitans will now face the Dodgers in the NLCS. Do you like the Mets' chances against LA to continue their magical run and make it to the World Series?
I do. I think the Mets are on one of those magic carpet rides, and we see this just about every season in baseball since the implementation of this new format with the wild card teams. It seems as if every year there is one of the teams that gets in at the bottom that gets hot and don't even remember that they're not supposed to be there. And I think that team this year are the Mets. It was the Phillies a couple of years ago. It was the Diamondbacks last year. Especially in the National League, we have seen historically that teams that get in 5th, 6th seed at the bottom surprise everyone. They get on a roll. The Mets have pitching that is hot right now, and the team believes. In short series, I think the most important thing is the confidence. They've got a leader in Lindor. They've got a resurgent Pete Alonso who's been hearing it all year long from Met fans about how much they want to get rid of the guy, and here he comes, and now he's one of the heroes in the postseason. You've got the unexpected energy that Jose Iglesias and the whole OMG movement brought, Grimace, the whole thing. It's all come together in a very powerful force. I think this goes 7 games. I do think it'll be a long series against the Dodgers. The Dodgers have a lot of star power with Ohtani and Betts and Freeman and Teoscar Hernandez. But I think the Dodger pitching staff has been depleted by injuries. They're really taxing their bullpen here. They had to use a lot of arms for a lot of innings against the Padres. There's going to be a letdown after defeating the Padres, their main West Coast rivals, in a very intense 5-game series. I think the Mets take 1 of 2 in Los Angeles, come back to New York on a high. This may go 6 or 7, but I'm picking the Mets in the National League.
All right, going Mets in a long series. I like it. Ricky, going for a Subway Series, which would be tremendous. See, I'm trying to talk about it a little bit less. I want it to happen. We want to see it here in New York, but just don't want to jinx it yet. So I'm just waiting. I hope we get that to happen. I think it can. You got the Yankees winning. You got the Mets winning. Should be good times for baseball in New York. Moving back to football, the Giants, they won their 2nd game of the season in Seattle last Sunday, and the team did it without Malik Neighbors and Devin Singletary. So, Ricky, are you believing that this Giants team is turning the corner from their early season struggles that we saw, or do you need to see more from this 2-3 squad?
Got to see more, and I'll see them up close next week when they take on the Philadelphia Eagles at the Meadowlands. But this Sunday night against Cincinnati, and here you talk about a team that has underperformed and is looking for a breakout game to try to get out of their own funk. Those are the Cincinnati Bengals with a top-quality quarterback like Joe Burrow. The Giants surprised everyone. I thought the football gods were in the Giants' favor, and I'm not trying to be Jazz Chisholm and say it was lucky. None of that. They outplayed the Seattle Seahawks. They should have had a touchdown on that one goal line, but I thought the ball had crossed, and the Seahawks brought it all the way back. Take nothing away from what the Giants did against Seattle out west when no one, with no Neighbors in the lineup, and no running back, the whole thing. They did enough to get the job done, special teams, every phase of the game. This Sunday night, I think they take on a Bengals team that is on the brink. You talk about coaches that might be on the hot seat. Zach Taylor, that team is expected, not to just maybe win that division, but to go far in the AFC playoffs. They are on the brink of extinction, too. So you have a very desperate Cincinnati Bengal team coming into the Meadowlands. maybe a bit of a letdown for the Giants after the win out on the West Coast. We've seen their up and down thing, for a few years now. No Malik Neighbors. That's going to be big this week because the Bengals secondary is susceptible to guys that can go deep and that are fast. Now, the Giants have other guys. We'll see how they can do again this week. They filled in very, very, very well, filled the gaps that Neighbors left behind against Seattle. But for some reason, something just tells me Cincinnati comes up with a big performance this weekend, and then maybe next Sunday at the Meadowlands, Eagles-Giants in a division battle, the mindset might be a little bit different. There, you may see a absolute war of the New Jersey Turnpike.
Oh, that'll be interesting, especially with Saquon Barkley returning to MetLife Stadium. That will be a fun one for sure. Now, Ricky, last thing on the Giants, because you mentioned rookie wideout Malik Neighbors. He is going to miss that Sunday night matchup with the Bengals. I'm assuming, do you look at this as a pretty big blow now that the receiver has missed back-to-back games? And do you believe that the Giants' offense can be productive again this week when he's going to be out once again?
It's always a big blow when you're missing a guy with that kind of talent. He showed you that he is going to eventually be, I'm convinced, from the small sample size that we have seen of the league Neighbors, I'm convinced that this kid, the sky's the limit. He has got all the talent in the world. That factory of great wide receivers, Beckham, I mean, how many of them, you'll see one on Sunday night for Cincinnati. I think Malik Neighbors has the potential to be a top 5 receiver in the entire National Football League. So missing him is obviously going to be a negative, a big blow to the Giants. Now, having said that, in football, it's a battle of attrition. Some of the other guys need to step up. The Giants do have some extra talent on that depth chart, and they need to show out on Sunday night. But will they miss Neighbors? Absolutely. I think it'd be foolish to say they wouldn't.
Yeah, they will miss him. The guy stepped up in Seattle in Week 5. We'll see if they can step up in Week 6 against the Bengals. All right, got a bonus question for you, Ricky, here on this week's episode. You are a proud Cuban American. What has it meant to you to deliver the calls of Yankees games and other sports you do, like the Eagles, in Spanish to the Hispanic community here in America? What has it meant to you to be one of those major voices in broadcasting for the Hispanic community?
Well, funny you asked that, Dexter, because I've been around these parts a very long time, as you know. First in music radio for a lot of years. I was a teenager when I was on FM playing, dance records, R&B and hip hop and everything else in the early to mid 80s into the 90s. And then I graduated. I kind of moved over into Spanish radio to kind of be the bridge between the cultures. And that's been my calling, especially for the first 25 years, musically, bringing the dance music and some of the Hispanic, motorcycle behind it, some of the big Hispanic artists that made it big in the 80s and 90s that were crossovers, the Mark Anthonys, who were, English singers before they went Spanish. So I've kind of rode that wave for years of being the bridge, between cultures in New York. And now I've been doing it in sports for the last, I guess I started doing baseball in 2005 down in Miami with the Marlins, then with the Phillies and the Yankees, and now in the Philadelphia Eagles. So it's almost the same challenge that I had way, way back in the 80s and 90s with the music cultures. Now I'm doing it with the sports, with the baseball, especially with the football. The baseball, the Hispanics are into it. It's the biggest sport for the Hispanic culture other than soccer, but for the Caribbean Hispanic, the Dominican, the Cuban, the Puerto Rican, the Venezuelan, baseball is number one. Everything else comes second. So that's easy. Football, that's more of a challenge because I'm trying to educate the Hispanic listener to the intricacies of the National Football League and the game itself. But to say that I'm not proud to be one of the pillars or one of the leaders to be able to introduce our culture to some of the beauty of American sport, look, it's something that I cherish, I'm proud of, and I take very seriously.
Oh, I know you do. You do an amazing job. I've always been a huge fan of yours. We love your calls, love when we get to work together at The Fan. I'm doing updates with you and everything, and I know you have done proud by a lot of people. A lot of people are proud of the work you've done and appreciate the work you've done. And I'm glad you were able to speak about that because people think of you a lot with the baseball, and that's so intertwined with Hispanic culture, as you mentioned, particularly in the Caribbean. But for football, I don't think people think of the challenges that you've had in terms of educating the culture on football. Bringing the cultures together, you said, which I thought was a really good point. Bringing them together, which is the beauty of what you can do in sports. That, folks, is Rickie Ricardo. Check him out. The Yankees Spanish voice play-by-play broadcast. You can also catch him on WFAN. Rickie, I appreciate you joining me on the New York Sports Rapid Rundown. We went through a very eventful week in sports. You were bringing the good vibes. You believe a Subway Series is coming soon. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Anytime, Dexter. Thank you for having me.
Anytime.